This conference will now be recorded.
Hello everyone. Thank you for joining today's session. Yesterday we were done with the demo session. Okay. We discussed few important points like software testing types, why performance testing is very important, LoadRunner architecture. Uh, so we also recorded a simple script and then we replayed and then went through the results like how the results come up. Okay. We also discussed the course content yesterday. Okay. Now in today's session, we'll be discussing different types of performance testing. Okay, which is again very important and a kind of day-to-day work in our projects. Okay, first uh, I will make a list of all the different important types of performance testing. Okay, so the first one is load test. Is my screen blinking for you, or is it fine? Can anyone say?
It's clear, Satish.
Okay, okay. For me, it is showing like blinking, so I'm asking. Okay, first one is load test. Second is endurance test or soak test or duration test. Okay. So third one is stress test. Fourth one is scalability test. Okay. Then we have volume test. Then failover test, and we have something called spike testing. Okay. We also have smoke testing, which we'll discuss later. Okay, later I will tell why we need to do smoke testing. Okay, so these are the different types of performance testing. It doesn't mean that in every project we perform all of these. It's not required. Only two or three from this list will be executed or considered for every project. Okay, it is not possible to run all of this type of tests in a single project or a single release. Okay, it depends on the client or the management to decide what type of test is more relevant to their project. They choose that particular type of test and continue with the project. Okay, I will tell you in some time, like if the client is not aware of performance testing at all, and if the client asks us to choose any one of these from this list, which is best suited for their application, we can suggest some. Okay, I will tell you at the end after this discussing this test. Okay, let's begin with the load testing first. Okay, before I explain load testing, I would like to add one more point with respect to performance testing. Okay, in general, performance testing is measured in terms of speed, stability, and scalability. Okay, okay. So you can just remember this. It is very important. Performance testing is measured in terms of speed, stability, and scalability. Now, in these different types of performance tests, okay, uh, there is something which is related to speed, something related to stability, and something related to scalability as well. Okay. Now let's discuss load testing first. Load testing is the first major type of test that we execute in every project. So even if you work in any company, any project, the first important major type of performance test that we run is load testing. Okay. So what is this all about? It is all about checking the speed of application by applying some expected load. Okay. So checking the speed of application by applying some expected load. Here, if you see the turn speed, okay. So what do you mean by speed? Uh, Speed in the sense of how fast the page is loading. You click on a link on the browser, how fast is the page loading? Okay. uh, you click a button, then how fast it is navigating from one page to another page. Generally on any web page we have links and buttons, right? So I'm just taking an example of that. If you click a link or a button, how fast the next page is loading, or how fast it is navigating from one page to another page is nothing but the speed. Okay, the amount of time it is taking to load the page. Okay, after performing some action like the click of a link or click of a button, how much time it is taking to load the page is nothing but the speed. Okay. Now what do you mean by load or expected load? It is nothing but number of users. Okay. If you test any application with a single user, that doesn't become performance testing, right? We don't call it performance testing because we cannot calculate the performance of any application by just testing with a single user. When multiple users are accessing the application, let's say like 100, 500 or 1,000, then how the application is performing is what we want to know. That's the reason without this statement, the load test becomes invalid. It becomes a kind of invalid one. Okay. Uh, I mean, normally, if you want to test with one user, why would we need a testing tool like LoadRunner, which we can simulate virtual users, right? You can normally uh, do it then. You can yourself do with single user, right? But performance testing is different. Here, it's all about the load, the users, the number of users that are you are going to test. Okay, this is the first major type of test. Okay. If this is successful, then only we generally move to some other tests like stress or endurance or scalability or something like that. Okay, so this has to be a successful test for us. And on what basis are we calling it a successful test or a failure test? I will tell you in some time. Okay, this load test will run for 1 hour in steady state. Generally, we run it for 1 hour. Okay. Now, what is a steady state? Uh, we'll discuss that later, but for time being, just understand that load test will run for 1 hour. Okay. Let's say you start a test at 9 p.m. and then you stop at 10 p.m. Generally, we run a load test for 1 hour minimum. So 1 hour is a steady state for a load test. Okay. What is that you are verifying? We verify basically response times because it is all about speed. So we verify response times. Okay. Response time means how much time it has taken. uh, See, I will just, if this is a client, okay, this is a server, Okay, now you send a request to the server, and the server will then send the response back. Okay, I will tell you what a server is and all those things in tomorrow session, but just for the time being, understand that we send a request and then we get a response. How much time it is taking to send a request and then to get back the response, the overall time taken, we call it the response time. Okay, so that's the amount of time taken to load the page. Okay, so response time is a very important term that we frequently use in our upcoming sessions as well, and we frequently use in our day-to-day work related projects as well. So we verify response time in load testing. Okay, do you remember the industry standard for response time? I have told this yesterday in the record and replay demo at the end. Do you remember?
2 seconds.
Yeah, correct. Okay, so industry standard is 2 seconds. That means when you click a link or button, the page should load within 2 seconds. Of course, there is an exception depending on the project architecture and complexity. The client may be okay with the page loading in 3 seconds or 5 seconds as well. Okay, it depends on the project as well. But in general, we consider 2 seconds. So now how do we know what is the acceptable response time or acceptable number? Okay, the client will give it to you. Okay, and that is called service level agreement. Okay, if the client says the SLA is 3 seconds, it means that every action you perform on that application, like click, login, launch, etc., the response time should be less than 3 seconds. Okay, okay. If the SLA is 3 seconds, the response time what you are getting should be less than the SLA. If anything is exceeding the SLA, then it could be considered a performance issue. Okay, now let's say the client has given an SLA of 3 seconds. Okay, you tested with some 100 users, and you could see that the launch itself is taking 7 or 8 seconds. Obviously that is exceeding the SLA given by the client. Then it is definitely a kind of performance issue. Okay, now until now I have been saying let's test with 100 users or 500 users, but who is going to give you the number of users? Okay, let's say I will take 500, but who is going to give you this number for your testing? Obviously the client will give it to you. Okay, are the stakeholders for the application, there will be stakeholders, they will give for you. Okay, we'll get so much information from the client or the application team, which we'll discuss in day after tomorrow session. Okay, I will tell you what are the different things that we need to focus on before you start working on any project. Okay, so as of now, what did we learn? Load testing is all about the speed of application by applying some expected load, like testing the application with some number of users. Okay, who is going to give you that number of users? The client is going to give you this number. Okay, this is the first major type of test that we perform in any project, and it will run for 1 hour. Okay, and what is the important thing that we verify? We verify the application performance, that is the response times. Okay, the response time should be less than the SLA given by the client. Okay, so any questions till now? Okay, now I told you that this is the first major type of test, and if this test is a failure, then there is no point in running other type of tests. Okay, now how do you determine if this is a pass or fail? a successful test or a failed test. Okay, for the time being, I will just tell you a couple of points which you can consider to mark it as pass or fail. Okay, when you run the test and you get errors, or when you get failed transactions, if the failed transactions are more than 2% or 3%, basically it depends on from project to project again. Okay, in some project they consider 2%, and in some project they consider 3%. Okay, let's say for us it is 2%. Okay, okay, when failed transactions are more than 2%, then it is a failed test overall. Okay, that means you should have more than 90% of passed transactions. Okay, in some projects they may accept 97% of passed transactions also, and in some projects they may need 99% passed transactions. Okay, so you can call it as a failed test when the number of failed transactions is more than 2 or 3%. Okay, or you can say when response times are very high. Okay, your SLE is just 3 seconds, and like you are getting response time like 10 seconds, 15 seconds, or 20 seconds, then obviously it is a failed test, right? And then also when you find some application issues like your application getting crashed or memory related errors, like, I mean there are many possible bottlenecks. Okay, you find some application issues like app crashing, memory related errors like memory leaks, okay, etc. Okay. In simple words, I have mentioned these 3 points. Okay, but we will discuss in detail in our upcoming session. So, when your overall failed transactions are more than 2 or 3%, or when response times are very high, okay, and then when you have some major application issues like app crashing or memory issues, then it is called a failed test. Okay, that means you have to fix this and then run again. Okay, you have to take help from developers, get these issues fixed, and then run the load test again to get a successful test. Okay, this is the major type of test that we execute. Okay, if it is successful, then only it's better to go for other types of tests. Okay, any questions? If you have any questions, you can ping in the chat as well. Okay, the next one is stress testing. Okay, so stress test in simple words is basically testing an application with more users than the load test, or with more volumes than the load test. So in simple words, I can write something like this. Okay, testing an application with more load than the load test. Okay, and you can write more users than the load test. Okay, you can also say more users. Okay, for example, in the load test, you are testing with 500 users. Okay, now anything more than that, like 600, 800, 1000, or even more, anything beyond the load test volume can be considered as stress test. Here you are verifying how the application is responding with more users than the load test. Okay, I mean sometimes it can be the number of users, or it keeps on increasing until the application breaks. Okay, for example, you keep on increasing the load, that is testing the application. Okay, at some point the application can't handle the load anymore and it breaks. Okay, so it can start anywhere with a number that is more than the load test, and then it can end up anywhere breaking the application. Okay, and that load where the application breaks is called breaking point. Okay, so stress test you can also run to find out the breaking point as well. Okay, now for how long we should run, we can run it for 1 hour again, like load test. Okay, and the SLE is again given by the client. Okay, it could be anything like 2 seconds or 3 seconds. Okay, I'm just taking an example of 3 seconds. Okay, then what are we going to verify here? Okay, we are going to verify the response times. So obviously performance is important, right? The speed, even in spite of an increase in the number of users or the load, the response time should not degrade. Okay, that's what we are verifying here. Okay, in simple terms, we are just verifying whether the application is able to handle more users. Okay, or if the application is facing some issues or are crashing with more users. Okay, that's what we are going to verify here. Okay, now let me explain the third, okay, and very important one. It's called endurance, soak, or duration test. Okay, the meaning is same, but different people call it with different names. Okay, so this type of test is all about checking the stability of the application. Okay, earlier I mentioned, right, the performance test is here. Yeah, the performance test is measured in terms of speed, stability, and scalability, right? So the stability mentioned here is for this type of test. It can be measured using this endurance test. Okay, all about checking the stability of the application by running the test for a longer duration. Okay, so how do you verify the stability? We just run it for a longer duration. Okay, so it's all about checking the stability of application by running the test for longer duration. Okay, for example, 3 hours, 5 8 hours. Okay, or even 1 day or 2 days. Okay, duration is. Okay, so if it's a weekend, you can start the test and continue to run for even 2 days. Okay, what is the important thing that you have to verify is how the application is behaving throughout the test. Like in the first hour, how the application is responding. In the second hour, how it is responding. Okay, in the third hour, how it is responding, and in the final hour, how it is responding. Okay, so let's say in the first hour, on average response times are like 2.5 seconds. Okay, let's say we are running for 5 hours. Okay, in the first hour average response time is 2.5 seconds. Okay, uh, uh, you should expect what we expect in general in the second hour also. We should expect same response time, right? Similar response time, like anywhere between 2 to 3 seconds. Okay, anywhere between 2 to 3 is fine. Okay, uh, so in general it should be same in the third, fourth, or final hours also. But if it's like in the first hour we are getting 2.5, then in the second hour you are getting 4. Okay, in the third hour you are getting even more, like 6 seconds, and in the final hour you are getting like 9 to 10 seconds. Okay, that means performance kept on degrading every hour. Okay, so there is no stability. Okay, so especially this type of test we run for longer duration, just to ensure that the application is stable enough. Okay, so the response time should be similar throughout the test. Okay, in this type of test, of course we verify response time. At the same time we focus on something called memory leaks. Okay, we verify response time. Okay, along with that we verify something called memory leaks. Okay, you will get something called out of memory errors due to this. Okay, most of the time there is a chance that there is something called memory leaks or out of memory errors, which we'll discuss in detail, okay, in our upcoming sessions. But for the time being, just understand that there is a high chance of getting these issues in endurance test. Okay, it doesn't mean that you don't get these errors in load test or stress test. Okay, you might get them, but the chances are very high in endurance test only. Okay, why? So to understand why, we need to understand memory, heap memory, and all those things. Okay, we'll discuss that in detail in our upcoming session. Okay, just understand that there is something called memory leak, an issue that is most common, and we generally observe this mostly in the endurance type of test. Okay, we need to run our test for longer duration. Okay, then only we can find this memory leak kind of issues. Okay. And one more important point is with how many users you are going to run this test. Okay. See, I said like 500 users in load test. Okay. In stress test, it can be more. Okay. Now in endurance test also, generally we use the same number of users similar to load test. Okay. Okay. All these different types of test, how to configure them in the tool, and how to initiate the test. Okay, we'll discuss practically also. Okay, any questions as of now? Okay, okay, so I assume you understand load test, stress test, and endurance test. Okay, now let's go with the scalability test. The name itself is again self-explanatory. Here, if you see the first line, where I mentioned performance testing. One second, yeah, performance testing is measured in terms of speed, stability, and scalability. So, this scalability testing is to test this scalability aspect of performance testing. Okay, so generally, a scalability test is all about checking the scalability of your application. Okay, how scalable it is. In simple terms, it involves understanding the client's requirements regarding scalability. Like if he says that in the next 1 year, the total number of users is expected to increase by 100%. So you need to prepare for that. Okay, let's say you ran a load test with 500 users. If the client predicts a 100% increase in users over the next 1 year, so you need to test with 1000 users now itself. This is because 100% increase of 500 is 1000 users that you need to test with right away. Okay, we directly don't test 1000 users. Okay, we gradually increase users, like we'll test 600 users, then 800 users until 1000 users. Okay, now the usual duration of scalability test is also like load testing, that is for 1 hour. Okay, okay, now the volume test. Okay. A volume test is very similar to a load test, except that it involves inserting a huge amount of data into the database before running the test. Okay, that involves inserting a huge amount of data into the database before running the test. The primary difference is that for a volume test, we insert a significantly large amount of data into the database before running the test. Okay, for example, you run a load test with 500 users. Okay, load test you run with 500 users. Okay, and database contains say, let's say 1 lakh records. Okay, so for a volume test, you run with 500 users again, but the database now contains more number of records, like 4 lakh or 5 lakh, something like that. Okay, this means we are testing how the application responds when there is a significantly larger amount of data in the database. Okay, so this volume test is like a database performance test. Okay, uh, we'll verify the response times in detail and also look into SQL query performance. Okay, we'll verify. Okay, we'll verify the response time in detail and also look into SQL query performance. Okay, such as which queries are taking longer and identifying any slow performing queries. Okay, for monitoring, we can use APM tools like AppDynamics or Dynatrace. Okay, for Oracle database, there is something called AWR report. Okay, that is very helpful to find out these SQL issues. Okay, the key difference between load testing and volume testing is that we intentionally insert a huge amount of data into the database. Now, who will insert this data for us? Okay, you should take the help of your database administrator to insert this large number of records. Okay, or if you are knowledgeable in PL SQL, you can also insert the data using some stored procedures. Okay, but in general, we take the help of DBA, database administrator. Okay, anyway, this type of testing is very rarely done. Okay, if only such type of requirement comes, we do. Otherwise, no, we don't do this. Okay. Okay, now spike testing. Okay. Uh, so spike testing, it is testing your application with sudden increases in load and then a sudden decrease in load. Okay, it is testing your application with sudden increases in load and then sudden decrease in load. Okay. Say if you start a test and suddenly add a 100 users, that means you are not giving the server any breathing time. Okay, you are suddenly increasing the number of users like 100, 200 like that, and then just run for 1 minute or so, and then suddenly decrease everything. Okay, that means you are giving a spike in terms of load. Okay, that you are putting on the application, you are putting some spike kind of load on the application. Okay, so when there is a sudden spike, a sudden increase or decrease in terms of load, how the application is withstanding. Okay, is your application able to withstand sudden increase or decrease in the load? Okay, that is what you are testing with respect to this. Okay. Again, this is also very rare. One example where spike testing can be useful is like uh, consider a festival sale like in Amazon or Flipkart. They say that the sale starts at 12 a.m. Okay, and during that time there will be a huge rush of users accessing the application, right? So spike testing ensures that your website or application can handle this kind of scenarios, okay, without crashing or slowing down. Okay. Okay. Now, if your client is not technical and unaware of performance testing and ask you to suggest what test to run for his application, then always remember this line. Okay. Okay, performance is testing is measured in terms of speed, stability, and scalability. Okay, so you always suggest to the client to run a load test for speed, okay, for stability and scalability. So what are the tests for that? For speed, you run load test. Okay, for stability, we run endurance test. Okay, and for scalability, we run a scalability test. Okay, if the client insists you to test any breaking point or something like that, then you go for stress test. Okay, otherwise these three are enough: load, endurance and scalability. Okay, so now so failure testing is left now. Okay, we'll discuss it in detail tomorrow. Okay, uh, because we need to know what servers are. Okay, what web server, what is app server, database server. Okay, we need to know about them before knowing about this failure testing. Okay, so tomorrow we'll discuss what is server, what is web server. Okay, what is application server. So what is database server? What is a protocol? Okay. Then we'll learn about failover testing. Okay. So this will be the agenda for tomorrow's session. Okay. All these things will cover. Okay. These are very important from interview point of view as well. Okay. Any questions?
No, Satish.
Okay. Okay. So if you don't have any questions, okay, we can connect tomorrow same time. Okay. Or if you have any further questions related to today's topic, you can ping me one to one in WhatsApp, or else you can ask tomorrow as well. Okay. So let's connect tomorrow same time. Okay. Thank you.